don't forget WPSL.com, webcaster to the world. From Serbia to Santo Domingo, from Bend, Oregon to Beantown. This is Money Info, brought to you by Princeton Research, where you can get that research paper every Sunday. PrincetonResearch.com with Mike King in Las Vegas, bright and early after this time change, and Charles Moscowitz in Boston. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
How are things going?
Well, you've got kind of a choppy market. The Saudi situation has created a spark, and it caused oil prices to make a new high yesterday, up at 57.80, but they've come off since then, about 75 cents. But oil prices are stronger as a result of problems in the Saudi Arab Kingdom.
Yeah, that
hey, Mike,
was...
it's Tim.
Oh, well, Tim, all right, Tim, what did you do with that Saudi prince? Come on.
You know,
he's in Houston somewhere, right?
One of life's great mysteries. Yeah, only in Saudi Arabia would they have a huge purge. All the people that are a threat to the king are arrested and immediately placed into detention into the local Ritz-Carlton.
Yes.
Like,
oh,
okay.
yeah.
Oh. You know, once you get sentenced, you're going to be going into a 2-bedroom suite, buddy.
Yeah, in Trump Tower. Oh, my. Yeah, house arrest. Oh, my God. Oh, that's a great line, Tim. So,
but it's true. They actually emptied out. They threw all the outsiders out of the local Ritz-Carlton, and all those guys detained have been put into that Ritz-Carlton. That's absolutely true.
No, come on. You've got to be making that up.
I am not making it up. One of my partners is in Israel and feeding me information from over there, and he said it is absolutely true.
Oh, my goodness. Gee, how do I get on that list? Man, I'd love to stay in a Ritz-Carlton for a while. Oh, man.
Oh, well.
So how
anyway.
How you doing? First of all, how are you recovering?
Oh, everybody's doing fine. I'm actually going down to see a permitting official in Galveston County about one last thing I have to do on my bay house, which was a little dock repair. But fortunately, we were not hit hard except in my offices. We still don't have elevators to my 4th floor, but I feel lucky. My law firm is on the 23rd floor of their building, and they currently have no elevators either.
Well, now, is that, you had mentioned before that it might be like February before they get those done. Is that right?
Well, they just told us they're going to put in a temporary freight elevator because they don't know when they're getting the parts and materials to replace the elevators that belong in our building. But who knows? You know, there's a lot of shortages of these materials because so many buildings were flooded on their bottom floors and their basements, which, of course, is where all the elevators sit during the night.
Sure.
And so there were a tremendous number of elevators in both, mid-rises and high-rises that were burned up by the water. And the supplies are very short. Things are having to be actually manufactured. And apparently there is an incredible shortage of craftsmen that know how to actually install these, repair and install them. So that's going to be a big gatekeeper.
Wow, that's absolutely amazing, Tim. You know, when it's very interesting that you say that because, advanced manufacturing is a big deal at our local college here at Indian River State, and it's where they're all going. But you talk to whether it's the construction types at their association or whatever, or the trades associations, whether it's plumbers or pipe fitters, they're all looking for people, and it seems like kids nowadays just aren't getting into those trades.
I think that they will actually get motivated to because compensation is rising and the alternatives are fewer. Obviously, the big lie about a college education, I'm still a believer in college education, have my undergraduate and master's and encourage my kids to go, but the payback for a college education is just not what it used to be. And 2 days in training as a fine craftsman and having a skill for the rest of your life, those guys make $80,000 to $100,000 a year in Houston. I know that.
Sure. Yeah, and we've got a local company here that makes subs for Boeing, and they've got orders out for 30 years. And what they're talking about is looking to replace their entire workforce because most of the people that have been in that company have been there 30 years. And they're about ready to retire, so they need to pass the baton to younger people, and they're desperately looking for people. And the starting salary is $60,000.
Well, this is already happening in the oil business. They've had all these monster layoffs, 250,000 people in Texas. And the general age of those crews is in their 40s and 50s and 60s. And it's a very interesting dilemma. But Mike, I heard you have another guest coming on, so if you need
you go ahead,
off,
Tim. He's going to call in later because we thought you were going to call in later, so we switched things around.
All right.
Okay,
well,
you go ahead.
I think let's go ahead and address what we see in oil prices and those reports I sent you, Mike. We've gotten all of the latest production reports out of the Permian Basin and out of the Eagle Ford Shale. And there's a phenomena going on here that people are just beginning to realize, that the IPs, which is a shorthand for initial production of all these new wells that have been being drilled, are very high at first, but their decline rates are steeper than they were expected. And all the predictions of us having stabilized increases of 2.5 million barrels a day in Texas and approaching 3 million by the end of the year are now being questioned. And what the oil companies have been doing, and I was just with the CFO of a New York Stock Exchange company yesterday in this business, he said everybody's been completing their DUCs to get their production up, but they really haven't been drilling a whole lot of new stuff. So that all this production and increases we've been seeing up to now has been the easy stuff. But what they've discovered is as they're completing these wells that, holy smoke, our long-term revenue is not going to be what we thought it was going to be. And so there's been some cutbacks in CapEx for the fourth quarter. And for the first time, I think that we are seeing some meaningful bottoming. I disagree that we're going to see $60 oil next year, but it's possible. There's always a rubber band effect here when this happens. But, Mike, I sent to you yesterday, and I don't have it in front of me today because I'm driving between Houston and Galveston, but still the 5-year hedges from Cargill yesterday are flat at $52. So Cargill and the collective user community of energy still is not buying a whole lot of oil above $52 a barrel for the next 5 years. So there's a real interesting business case to be made, seeing a pop, but I'm much more aligned with lower for longer, because if the Russians and the Saudis come back into the market and say, great, we got the shale guys down, let's go back and produce again, they've shown historically that that's what they do. So it's a really tough model right now to buy into. I'm still a believer that the bigger players with the dividends are the ones that make the more sense today if you're going to buy into energy today, but only because they can produce consistent returns. At $52, everybody makes money except offshore. Offshore, if it's a new project, cannot be done for less than $60 a barrel. But at 52, existing projects offshore work and new projects onshore work. But it's the biggest, most efficient players that make money at those levels.
But didn't oil close at like 54 the other day?
Oh yeah, I'm not denying that, but ask Mike to send you and when I get at a point where I'm in front of my computer, I'll send the quotes for this morning. Unless something dramatic happened overnight, even with that, yesterday's close, the 5-year hedges and the 5-year chart was still at $52 flat. It's moved up from 47 over the last 90 days to $52, but it's not spiking above $52 even 5 years out. And that chart is a result of the collective knowledge of all of the biggest buyers of energy in the world. Cargill lays off all their exposure to the biggest buyers in the world, the big utilities, the big, the chemical plants, the plastics plants, everyone that needs a stable feedstock for years. And those users, those buyers, aren't buying above $52 today. So at least that tells me the smart money that's the ultimate user does not believe a spike is coming.
Wow. That's amazing. And you're talking 5 years, not just next year, but 5 years.
No, I'll send it to you guys as soon as I get where I'm in front of a computer again, and it'll be before your show is closed. After I drop off, I'll make that happen. I'll send you today's hedges and scroll all the way down and look at the 5-year chart, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about.
Wow. That's well. Now, what was supposedly going on? I thought it was Permian Basin where the fracking had started back up, and everything was gangbusters.
It is, and there's no question that that's happening. But what's happening is that the production coming after the fracking is not staying at as high as they thought it would. The decline rates are faster than they thought they were going to be. So to give you an example, in the Eagle Ford, it is not unusual from the first day an oil produces to the 365th day of having a 25 to 30% decline rate in production. That's a good well. In some cases, they're seeing decline rates now over the last year of 50 and even 75%. So that screws up all of their long-term economics. It screws up their capital recovery calculations. It screws up all of their budget. And so that's why you're seeing each week we're seeing a few rigs laying down, including in the Permian Basin. And Devon Energy, I think I mentioned on the last show, cut their capital budget by $100 million for the fourth quarter, but said we're still going to produce just as much oil as we said we were going to. This is the easy oil they've been producing by completing these drilled but uncompleted wells that they did over the last 2 years. The new wells are going to be more expensive. The trades are harder to get. The fracking is more expensive. The proppant, which is the sand and the chemicals, is more expensive. And we're going to see some pressures coming. So if it moves up to 60, there will be a huge sigh of relief. But I'm not betting my money it goes to 60 and stays there.
Wow.
5780 looks like major resistance. It really seems to have topped there at 5780, a double top with a lot of volatility.
It would be pretty hard not to short at these levels. We've done pretty well and made a $5 move whenever it peaks at the resistance levels before. Now, the resistance has moved up, right, Mike? Because the other resistance was between 52 and 53, wasn't it?
Yes, and now it's 57.80, 57.70, 57.5 to 58 is the major resistance.
Got it.
Okay, so as fast as we're growing in the United States, I would presume the demand for petroleum products would grow. Is that correct?
Yes, and we are seeing higher demand in refined products than were predicted, and we're exporting more refined products. So that's good for the refinery business, but we still have a lot of oil out there, but we've eaten through a lot of inventory. Asked Mike to send you guys. Art Berman did a report and sent it out yesterday that I forwarded to Mike. He's one of my favorite analysts, and he believes we are seeing that inventories are substantially shrinking, and we should see a rise in the price of oil. And while I have a lot of faith in art, I'm still wondering, why is this 5-year chart still holding at $52 like this on the worldwide purchases of long-term supplies of oil? It's almost like the Dow and the bond market. Who's right these days?
Well, and there's one of those pseudo experts, I guess, on CNBC, who's really talking recession now. Looking at the oil numbers, I mean, do you see anything quite like that in your field?
No, I really don't. I see stability right now, not a lot of hiring. The guy that was in my office was literally at this NYSE firm. They laid off 12 of their senior people Friday a week ago. But at the only hiring I'm seeing is happening at the crew level. They're trying to still get rid of their high-priced people. I don't see a huge recession. I do not see a huge boom. I think that right now what the economy seems to be enjoying is stability and some upward momentum. We had 3% productivity numbers last quarter. That was a surprise. We've got the GDP moving up. There seems to be some underlying legs under this economy that do not portend a recession. So if it's on CNBC, I have a tendency to discount it anyway.
Yes. Yes. The old trust but verify type thing.
Well, and as Kramer said on our show, like we talked about, Mike, he always said, short the stocks I recommend. They'll be down next week.
So he doesn't take himself that seriously.
No, he doesn't. He was really a pleasure to have on the show until they stopped. He had a new contract, and it forbid him from being on any other media, and so he had to quit coming on our show. But we enjoyed having him, and he was fun to have.
Wow, that's amazing. That's amazing. Yep. Well, has he always been that crazy?
Well, our experience with him was that, but maybe that's his public persona. I don't know him personally. I'd met him through some mutual friends in New York one time. And, I know who it was. It was Tobin Smith, Mike.
Yes.
Tobin introduced me to Kramer because he and Kramer had become buddies, and when Toby came on, he recommended that Kramer accept our invitation, and he did.
That's cool.
So that's kind of how it happened.
So, Tim, what's happening in the world of refining? Are we seeing anything new on the horizon?
We are seeing some new pressures for expansion. We are now up to about 3 million barrels a day of exported oil. That is putting pressure on the temporary storage facilities needed at the Port of Houston to be able to store that oil and then get it loaded onto barges and send it over to where it's going. And some of this is not only going overseas, but to China. And so we are taking away some market from other producers because of the spread between Brent and WTI. And what's happening is it's beginning to put pressure on the infrastructure already, and there are people that are planning expansion of infrastructure because of our export market, both the unrefined crude and refined products. So unless we see a huge spike in oil, that I don't expect, the refiners are going to continue to do just fine.
Wow, that's very interesting. That is very interesting. So,
and the pipeline companies. Well, I'm still a big fan of the most efficient, well-run pipeline companies because there's still a lot of production running through those, and these sales offshore, those pipelines now got to go all the way from the Permian Basin to the Port of Houston. Somebody's got to pay the toll.
And which pipelines do you like the best?
Oh, I still like Kinder Morgan and Enterprise. I like them both. Enterprise probably better. I own more Enterprise, but and Enterprise's dividend is still pretty nice.
Now,
what's the symbol on that?
Go ahead, Mike.
EPD.
EPD.
Now, where are those pipelines, Tim?
Oh, all over. Enterprise has pipelines literally all over the United States. Their biggest one is basically from Oklahoma City all the way through Texas down to the Port of Houston. They recently expanded that to add another 300,000 barrels a day of flow on their same easement. It was just brilliant. They didn't have to go back and buy easements. They literally expanded above their existing pipelines and ran a whole other set of pipelines that improved their production by 300,000 barrels a day and didn't have to buy a square foot of land to do it. I mean, they're smart operators.
So, okay, so we've got the pipelines seem to be working, and you mentioned the exports. Where are we exporting oil? That seems wonderful.
Well, I'll tell you where we're going to be exporting more soon. If Venezuela goes into default next week, if that meeting with the creditors doesn't work, that is what I think could cause a spike. They produce 2 million barrels a day into the market today, and that's way down from where they were because most of the majors won't work there anymore because they're owed so much money. If they default on those bonds and the bondholders act to seize their production, it's going to really, really affect the market. I mean,
what's the date of that?
Mike, I know their meeting is somewhere, I think it's mid-month. I'll do some checking, but no one expects the creditors to agree to take a big haircut on what they're owed. No one has any optimism out of this meeting, and Maduro just thinks he can do anything he wants to. And there will be really, really tough times for Venezuela, much worse even than today. If they default and those creditors work to seize that oil, it'll be stuck in the courts for years.
So where does Venezuela sell its oil? I presume we don't buy it, do we?
Well, I think that what happens is the oil is frozen, just like any other asset that is seized and it's in court and nobody knows who owns it. I don't know who would buy it. Who would buy it if you can't be sure that you won't be able to get the product and you won't be able to get your money back if it's thrown into a huge, court case?
Sure. Yeah. Understood. Yeah. But who is their normal trading partner? Is it Cuba?
It's they used to give oil to Cuba. That was part of what was his name? Hugo Chavez.
Oh, Chavez. Yeah.
He would give millions of barrels to Cuba, and now Cuba has to pay for its oil, and others buy oil from them, but they're not producing as much because they literally owe billions to the big service companies who have quit working, the Halliburtons, the Baker Hughes, the Pioneers. Everybody, the Venezuelans have stuck it to them, and so they've all sent their crews home.
So now, did they do what, like, I think, was it Mexico that did a lot of nationalization?
Oh, yeah. All of Venezuela is nationalized.
Oh,
Absolutely.
God. Okay. Yeah.
Citgo is owned by the Venezuelan government, but they have been trying to sell it in the United States, and I would imagine all of the assets of Citgo would get frozen up if they default on their bonds.
Well, isn't that the big 7-Eleven supplier?
Could be. That I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I think there's Citgo stations. Yeah.
We just have Citgo. We have Citgo branded stations all over Texas, and generally speaking, they're cheaper than most. But they're certainly subject to being seized if these bondholders go into default.
So, okay, let's use a little crystal ball and say hypothetically that it does. What kind of reaction would it kick that market into? Would it be 60?
I think that then, if that happens, I think we could see a near-term 60. But I also think the Russians and the Saudis in days could make up that 2 million barrels a day. Now, it'll cost more money because then the system now has to add transportation costs that it didn't before. But, yes, all bets are off if Venezuela defaults, we could see it up at 60 and stay there for a while.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, it was very interesting. This one family of a basketball player from Serbia that I just dealt with over the last week. They were telling me that apparently the United States is starting to sell oil to their country, which I thought was really interesting.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to let you interview your next guest, and as always, I thank you for being on the show. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Tim, you have a good one. We will be doing kind of a little hiatus, I guess, if you will, during our WPSL Christmas Kids campaign, but we will be back live on the 21st of December. So anyway, you have a good Thanksgiving, my friend.
Thank you, gentlemen. Bye-bye. You too.
All right. Okay, Mike, who's our next guest?
Hi, it's Rick Schumacher.
Hey, Rick, how are you?
I'm well.
Good.
I just returned from the land of Mike King.
Very good.
And you survived? Huh?
I not only survived, but I went Sunday to watch the World Championships and the PBR, the Professional Bull Riders, and I've watched it on TV for 7 years. Never watched it in live, but boy, what a difference!
Was that in Thomas and Mack Arena at UNLV campus? Or was it at the new one?
The new T-Mobile
The
arena.
new T-Mobile, yeah. I hear it's really nice.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, I've got some friends who work at the hockey team, so yeah. Wow, that's great. So I take it you left Las Vegas a few pounds lighter, maybe? If you get my drift.
Yeah, everyone's supposed to make their donation when they leave.
That's right. Yes, and donation portals are everywhere in Las Vegas. Yes.
Yes, they are.
Oh.
Quite a city, though. Quite a city. Live and vibrant, 24 hours a day.
Yeah.
Not that I was up and around 24 hours a day.
Yeah. Yes. So what's going on with you guys at Pressure Bio?
Well, we've had some interesting things going on. I think since the last time I've been on the show, I guess maybe we should just quickly remind everybody that we're a life science company. We make instruments and consumables that are sold to the research market around the world, and we have some of the top protein researchers using our instruments, and primarily we think it enables them to hopefully make a discovery faster, make a discovery with more confidence, because we give the researchers, we believe, a more accurate way of breaking open a cell. It sounds trivial, guys, but it's far from trivial. It is the most important part of research. For biological research is how you break the cell and get all of the stuff out, everything you can possibly get out. You never get 100%, but you try to get out. For instance, most people consider if you get 40% of the proteins out of a cell, you're doing well. And it's those proteins and lipids and DNA and RNA that are going to give us the next vaccine and the next strategic way of stopping a disease or curing a disease. So that's why it's so critical to break the cell up in a very high quality manner, and that's what we do. We do it like squeezing a sponge. We squeeze cells in a pressure chamber. It sits on a laboratory bench, and it's taken a while for scientists to start to understand that what we have is as good as we believe it is, and our sales, as you know, continue to grow. Our customer base continues to grow. So what we did is just last week we announced an expansion into China. We've always had a distributor in China, but one of the top protein scientists that we work with, who came out of the number one lab in the world for protein analysis, and that's the lab of Professor Rudi Ebersold in Switzerland, Dr. Tianan Gao, he's Chinese, left after 5 years. He's an MD, PhD. He left after 5 years of working with Professor Ebersold and went back to China, and he's setting up what we call a center of excellence for us. And we announced that last week that his laboratory is going to be, it's at what's called the Westlake Institute for Advanced Study, and it is a center of excellence. He's bought 3 of our instruments, and 3 of our main instruments, and 1 of our new instruments that we're just coming out with, and he's going to be a site where people from all over China can come and learn and watch from the guru on how to use this instrument to get better quality, we hope, in their research. So we're very, very excited that we have our first center of excellence in Asia, and it's in China.
Boy, that sounds absolutely amazing. What do you consider? You talked about, normal research, a lot of waste, maybe 40, 50%. What is a really successful Pressure BioScience, I don't want to say experiment, but after it's done, what are you looking at as far as a waste of a gene? It's got to be very slim, right?
Well, it's not. I wouldn't call it waste. Try to explain this. Inside of when you think of a cell, just think of a circle, a cell, and that cell is made up of a lot of proteins and fat molecules called lipids, and of course, probably has either DNA, or RNA, or both inside the cell. And the key here is the secret to the next drug or the next cure is probably going to come from analyzing those proteins. And when you have 10,000 proteins in a cell, these are different proteins with different functions in a cell. Some of them are proteins on the outside of the cell that let the things bind to the cell, the anti-cancer compounds or the bad pathogens that are going to kill the cell. They bind to the cell. It depends on what proteins are there. So as a scientist, you're studying the proteins and the mechanisms of what they do. And if it's a protein is made up of thousands of what we call amino acids. And if you have one change or 2 changes in that whole string of amino acids, it could change the function of that protein, which could make it so that it no longer works. It no longer does what it's supposed to do, and therefore you have some kind of a disorder. So as a scientist, you're looking for this because the theory is once you know what causes it, you can kind of prevent it and fix it. And so the more proteins you get, the better chance you have of finding the protein that has the change in it that could be causing the issue. And so if you're normally breaking a cell, guys, and you're getting 3,000 different proteins, and we give you a method to get 3,500 different proteins, there's 500 additional proteins. So you have more of a chance to find the reason that someone has a disease or a disability or can't accept certain type of therapy, because now you have 500 more proteins to study, and it could be one of those that is causing the problem. And once you fix it, you can relieve that problem. So in this case, to answer your question, if you know that the normal method of breaking a cell, let's say you're breaking a prostate cell and you get 3,850 proteins normally, and you use my method, our method, and you get 4,200 proteins, that's a big difference, because now as a scientist you say, I've got 350 more proteins I've never been able to look at to see if maybe one of these proteins is modified and is the reason for this disorder or this disease. So that's one big measure, is how many additional proteins can you get from breaking open a cell by using our method. And there's been a number of papers from some very good institutions that say when you squeeze a cell with pressure, you squeeze it back and forth and break it. There's a number of papers, publications have come out to say that those investigators found additional proteins, which means they have a bigger chance to make that cure, find that new drug. So that's one big measure is how many additional proteins can you get from a cell. You'll never get 100%. You just, if there's 10,000, you're lucky to get 4,000 or 5,000 on the best of days. But if we consistently give you 10 or 20% more, that's a big, big, big advantage. And then the quality of the proteins. And we believe that there's over 120 or 130 publications from scientists all over the world that are using our method that have compared it to their existing or previous methods, and they're saying either they're getting more proteins or they're getting higher quality proteins, and therefore this is the method that they've chosen.
Boy, this is absolutely fascinating. You know, it's the field you're in is just so gee whiz, you know, and so futuristic, and but where we're going, I mean, I think it's absolutely amazing. So now the instruments themselves, what does this? I would imagine this China arrangement that you have has got to be a total game changer for Pressure Bio.
It's a game changer for us because China's a big market, as we all know. They are putting a lot of money into scientific research, and to have somebody of the stature of Professor Gao to come back from the number one lab many people consider in the world to set up a lab in China and to purchase, and it's not like we gave him this equipment. He purchased everything that he got, and because we're giving him our word that all the new discoveries we make on changing the instrument, making the instruments, he's going to see them first. In return, he's setting up his lab so that scientists from throughout Asia, particularly in China, can call him up and say, look, I'm interested in Pressure BioSciences PCT, pressure cycling technology method. I'd like to come see it. So they'll come in for a day and be able to use the equipment under the guidance of someone who's worked with the equipment now for 5 or 6 years. So to have that ability, now we have a distributor in China, but now we've got a leading research in a leading university setting to become a center of excellence. So it's a game changer for us, particularly in Asia and in China. We're very excited about it. It was a nice order to sell these 4 instruments, but probably just as important, it's nice to have someone like Professor Gao there who is going to become basically an extension of Pressure BioSciences. His lab will be there to teach people in China how to use it, and hopefully this means, we expect this means increased sales in China.
How many units are you theorizing that this could become for Pressure Bio?
Well, we haven't given out that number, and as a publicly traded company, we can't give it out. But okay. I can tell you that right now we have about 300 units in the world placed, and we believe that we could multiply that by a factor of 5 or 10 over the next 3 to 5 years.
Wow.
That number I've given out a number of times. Well, when you think about it, Dr. Gao is doing what most people are doing with our instrument. He's putting it in front primarily of an instrument called a mass spectrometer. Mass spectrometer reads proteins and gives you the composition of the protein. But you can't just put a cell into a mass spectrometer. You have to take the cell and break it apart and free all the proteins, as we say, maybe 10,000, free as many as you can, and find the one you think is related to whether it's diabetes or prostate cancer or balding or whatever it is you're studying. You need to find that protein, and then you need to chop the protein down and put the pieces into the mass spectrometer. Our machine basically does that, and he's using our machine in front of his mass spectrometers, which are a $500,000 machine. Ours is a $50,000 machine, so we're 1/10 the cost, but we believe we give a better answer in the mass spectrometer because we extract more proteins in better shape to be studied in the mass spectrometer. Now, there's 16,000 labs. From everything we've read and seen, we believe there's 16,000 labs in the world that have one or more mass spectrometers. So
holy smokes.
Theoretically, there's 16,000 labs that could use our instrument.
Yeah.
And right now, Well, right now we're in 300 of them. So is it too much to think that we could be in 1,000 or 2,000 of those labs over the next 3 to 5 years? I don't think so. I think that hypothetically that could really be done. It's not unusual to place that many instruments for an instrument company. So we're excited. We didn't have a sales team before now, and now in the last few months we've hired 5 people. We didn't have Center of Excellences before. Now we have one in China. We didn't have a computerized instrument that could do all the things that our instrument can do now. That's been out now for slightly over a year, and it's really been well accepted. So everything's kind of lining up, guys. Very excited about how things are lining up for us. So we think the third quarter we gave guidance would be the best quarter we've ever had, and we'll be announcing that quarter next week. We think the fourth quarter could be the best fourth quarter we've ever had, and we're really looking forward to 2018 because we got so much inertia heading us in the right direction.
Okay, now next next question off the top of my head. Okay, so let's say, hypothetically, you get 1,000 labs, 2,000 labs. Can you supply all of them?
Yes, that's a good question. If you'd asked me that a year ago, I would have to hem and haw. If you asked me that 2 years ago, I would say no. But you're asking me it today, and today I can say yes. And the reason is that part of what we've done in the last year, in addition to building the sales team we never had, in addition to designing and building the brand-new computer-driven instrument that we've never had, those are done. We did something else. We went out and found a contract manufacturer that makes instruments for a living. They don't design and develop them. They make them. You give them the blueprints and you give them the parts and they put it together, and they have the right certification for the entire world that you need. It's built under what's called ISO standards, 9001. And because of that, the answer is yes. We started out very slow a year ago. They were building, took them maybe a month to build the first instrument. Now they can build 4 instruments in a week, and if they had to, they could double or triple that. So the answer is yes. Let the orders come in. We'll be able to fill them.
Boy, that's phenomenal. That is absolutely phenomenal. So now I presume you were not just on vacation in Las Vegas. There was some sort of a conference out there.
Yeah, I did take Sunday off, I have to admit.
Okay.
I did take Sunday. Mike was with me, and I got to spend some quality time with your good friend Mike. And I think more important, I had a small table at we won an award. The award we won was for the best new instrument. And,
great.
And I will say that next week is very important to us because, as we talked about before, we are a finalist in the R&D 100, which is the #1 award in the world for new innovative technologies, and we are finalists for the same instrument. We're up against some pretty heavy duty, MIT and General Electric and General Motors and many others. Our little company, but we're just to be a finalist is great. Fantastic. But Mike was there, and he saw we had 5 or 6 people that stopped by and spent 10 minutes each talking about the needs that they had and how our instrument might satisfy the need. And it was fun to be there, and it was fun to have Mike there to listen to real customers, lab directors coming by saying, wow, I had no idea that it could do this. This could really be beneficial.
Now, were these any of these folks from like educational institutions or just general labs?
No, there were several from universities. There were several from companies. They were in many different fields. There were some that were studying human disease. There were some that were looking to extract compounds out of the cannabis plant. As we know, there's a lot more to a cannabis plant than just the psychoactive compound THC. There's a lot of compounds, as there are in many plants, that could be very beneficial to humankind. if you get them out and purify them out and make them available. Many of our best drugs, many of our best compounds out there have come from plants, as we know. So we definitely had some people there that were interested in compounds from different plants and academic companies. There was one guy from a biopharma company there. So it was a motley crew, I would say.
That sounds great. Well, now, it's interesting you say plants. Can you work with, like, organics or anything quite like that? Or is that out of your field?
No, we work, what we do is pressure is, we harness high pressure, and pressures that go up to, in the current instrument, believe it or not, 45,000 pounds per square inch, and it can do many, many things. I don't want to confuse everybody by talking about the 20 or 30 biggest things it could do. The most important thing is that under the right circumstances, we can break cells and free proteins, and that's what's important here, because that's such a critical part of it starts with research. Research starts with sample preparation, breaking the cell and getting out the components that you're going to study. But it doesn't matter whether it's plant or animal, human or microbe. Doesn't matter if you're studying the Zika virus or the HIV virus, or you're studying, a plant. You're studying the fungus on wheat. We've got people studying barnacles on ships because they're trying to figure out what can we do to maybe correct this problem, whatever it is. What's killing the wheat and the rye and the barley, and how do we stop the barnacles from attaching to the side of a ship and slowing it down, and all these different things that are going on. They need to study that compound. So that's generally what they're studying. And again, it doesn't matter whether it's a virus or a protein or a lipid or a bacteria. It doesn't matter if it's from plant or animal. Our machine doesn't choose in between. Our machine will break a cell no matter what that cell is. It just depends on how much pressure, how much heat, and if you have to use any type of extra chemicals with it. And if you do, generally it's a lot less, so we're green in that respect, a lot less chemical, because under pressure, things work totally different than they do, and generally they work with fewer levels of chemicals, so therefore we have less contamination or less refuge coming out that we have to discard.
That's interesting. You mentioned the Zika. That's it's starting to become a major news story down here in Florida again after a few of the cases that have hit here. And it's boy, whatever your magic machine can do to assist in that research would be great.
Well, I've been very blessed in my life. I was in the field. My background and expertise is in infectious disease, and I was in the field in the late 70s and 80s with hepatitis B, hepatitis C, and HIV when they all were coming out, and a very scary time, especially for the blood area, the blood transfusion area. And I was very blessed to be working with people throughout the world in trying to find the cause and then develop the cure. And also, I mean, look at hepatitis C. 30 years ago, we didn't even know what caused hepatitis C. We called it non-A, non-B, because we knew it wasn't hepatitis A, which is called infectious hepatitis, and it wasn't hepatitis B, which used to be called serum hepatitis. So we called it non-A, non-B. And then we found the virus through a lot of work. The world found the virus, and now there's a cure. Now there's a cure for hepatitis C. That's what's so important, makes me get up every morning and want to go to work and do what I can, because we're one small part of it. If we can provide an instrument that can give you better quality biomolecules to study, better quality proteins or DNA to study, and you can end up as a scientist discovering a cause of a disease and maybe even help discover a cure, we're one small part of that. And so that's one thing that keeps me going. And I think some of my investors have come to me and to say that, they like it because it's an impact investment. They want to make money, but they also want to make money while they're investing in something that can have an impact. And we've had an impact And I think we'll have a greater impact going forward as we move from 300 machines out there to 3,000, from 150 customers to over 1,000 customers. It's going to be very satisfying, guys, to look back and say, hey, these guys are using our machine, and we were part of the process of them helping to find the cause of this disease and maybe even helping to find the cure. So it's something which is why I got into the business and what's kept me in this business for 45 years now. It's just very exciting every day.
Boy, that's it's an amazing story, Rick. Mike, tell us about the stock. I know Rick can't really talk about it.
Well, it really looks good. It's been levitating at 4, and it looks like a really good buy here. It's got a great opportunity. There's no question about that.
And the stock symbol again, Mike?
PBIO, Pressure BioSciences. P as in Peter, B as in boy, I as in Ira, O as in Oscar. PBIO.
And Rick, your website for Pressure BioSciences?
It's a tough one, pressurebiosciences.com.
Pretty direct there.
Pretty direct,
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, it sounds like you're just on the verge of absolutely exploding worldwide, which is really, really intriguing. I think we've been talking with you, almost 2 years. So your development is taking place right in front of us. So it's kind of cool.
It has. It's been very different. When we started with you, 2 years ago or so, the company was 9 people, 1 salesperson, probably $1 million in sales, if that. Probably $1.2 million in sales. Didn't have a lot of key opinion leaders. Now it is 2 years later, and it's totally changed. We just in the past few months, we've got 5 salespeople, got a brand new instrument. We've been nominated for the most innovative award in the world with our new instrument, and the instrument takes us to places we've never been before in the biopharma field. The companies that can use us now can use us for multiple things, whereas 2 years ago it was really only one thing. They could just break a cell, and that's it. Now we can break a cell, but we can go in once they have the cell. We can break down the proteins from the cell. We call them digest the proteins in a very efficient manner. We have the computer to spit out everything in the USB port. It's quite a different thing. So we've grown in front of your eyes, and we're not done yet, guys.
There you go. What a bright future. Pressure BioSciences. Rick Schumacher, President, CEO, and keep it going there, Rick, and we'll be talking to you a lot, I'm sure, during 2018. Hard to imagine we're talking 2018 already. Folks, have a good day. You've been listening to Money Info, brought to you by Princeton Research. Don't forget that research paper every Sunday night.